This is Group 5. We are presenting our teaching outline on our research and study of the passage from Matthew 25:14-30, the parable of the talents. Our focus text is Matthew 25:24-27, which features the third servant's encounter with the master. Our question that we'll be addressing today is, what is the master's expectation of his servants with what was entrusted to them? And the thesis that we'll be walking through is that Jesus is using the parable of the talents to show that God desires his followers to steward resources faithfully, coming from a proper attitude and understanding of who he is.
In the parable of talents, the master entrusted each one of the servants with a certain amount of talents, each according to their level of experience. His purpose was to see whether or not the servants would be faithful to use what was given to them and to reward them accordingly. The master had no intentions of playing favorites, but he realized that different people have different abilities. The third servant did not receive the master's blessing, not because of the amount he was given, but because he did not handle what was given well. This parable is one of, among others in the entire book of Matthew, that show that Jesus is the master and the servants represent the people that are entrusted with different resources and abilities. We can learn from the parable of the talents that it takes faithfulness and action to please the master.
In verse 27, the parable of the talents, the master tells the third servant that he should invest his money with the bankers. The third servant had a misunderstanding of what to do with his master's money. Instead of putting it in the bank and getting some kind of interest for it, instead, the third servant buried his money in the ground. And so, because of this activity of the third servant, he was not able to share in his master's happiness.
By using Logos, we were able to see that in verse 24, the servant claims that his master is a hard man by saying that he knew it experientially, through observation. In other words, he had experienced the master being a hard man. In verse 26, using the Bible Sense lexicon, the no changes. We now see the master restating the servant's comment, but uses a different sense of the word knew. That is acquired through reflection and thinking, not through experience. Before using Logos, my understanding was that the master never stands up for himself, but after using the Bible Sense lexicon, I see that he did stand up for himself by telling the servant that his knowledge of him was inaccurate. Rather than this knowledge leading the servant to work for the master's pleasure and sharing in his happiness, he held on to his false understanding. In verse 24, we see that Bloomberg, who is the second one on the list for best commentaries on the book of Matthew, he shows us that the idea of the master being hard is unjust and capricious, something that the servant imagines, probably nothing that he actually experienced, like he said. Then, further down in verse 26, we can see also behind the text the concept of you knew. The fact here that it is a rhetorical question. The master is not declaring that the servant knew, but serving him with a rhetorical question, asking if the servant really knew who he was.
We are coming near to a conclusion with the applications that the necessary applications of this parable is that we have to use our talents for the kingdom of God. We are to call to be faithful and to work with what we have been entrusted with, no matter what the size may be.